Hello and welcome to another episode of Chuchu as a Ranker. On this episode we're going to be continuing our albums of the year list. This time it's 2012, and 2012, well, I kind of want to throw out the quote from Lawrence of Arabia: "There is nothing in the desert and no man needs nothing." So yeah, we're deep into the doldrums right here. Nevertheless, I still have 10 really good albums for you, so without further ado, let's be complete rankers and rank up a storm. These are my personal top 10 albums from 2012. So we're going to be kicking off this list with Shields, which was the fourth album by experimental indie folk pop band Grizzly Bear. This record almost qualifies for typical Indie Album of the Year award, but is betrayed by its penchant for experimentalism, which gives it a sharper focus than most typical indie records. The album delights in never quite going where you think it might, often throwing intricate arrangements and unexpected instrumentation at you, but in the most delightful way, of course. The record has a great laid-back vibe to it and is very consistent and cohesive, with all the different tracks complementing the whole. This is definitely an album where the whole is better than the sum of its parts. Highlights include the unexpected time changes that thread throughout speaking rounds, the beautiful vocal harmonies of Yet Again, the kettle drum-like synths and wobble boards that feature on A Simple Answer, and the more bombastic build-up of Halfgate, which sounds fairly ominous and kind of like a hellscape. So yeah, Shields is a relaxing, atmospheric indie record which does more than enough to be curtain-jerking this list. Next up, we have The Shallows by I Like Trains, which was the band's third album. On this record, the band are lightening up their sound significantly, almost entirely abandoning distortion. In its place comes more electronics, mainly in the form of 80s style synths, and a dancier, more rhythmic and angular form of songwriting. Most of these tracks start quietly and slowly build to an emotional and sonic crescendo. Talking of emotion, a lot of the resigned sadness is retained from their last record, and the album is atmospheric and cohesive. Highlights include the almost math rock style rhythms of Mnemosyne, the building eventual growl of The Hive, the stripped back bubbling sadness of The Turning of the Bones, and the cool post-punk guitar riffs of We Used to Talk. This is I Like Train's softest and most accessible record, but also in a lot of ways their most inessential, mostly because it's just a little too polite for its own good. This record doesn't have much in the way of dynamism or edginess, choosing instead to concentrate on relaxing atmospherics. But if you want a laid-back experience with gentle waves of cathartic soundscapes, this might well hit the spot. Next up, we have Attack on Memory, which was the third album by American garage rock band Cloud Nothings. On this record, it's all about high energy, miserable lyrics, cool extended instrumental sections, and occasional guttural screams. A lot of this record really reminds me of early Idlewild, but I guess in direct style it probably lies somewhere between Nirvana and Fugazi. At 33 minutes long, this album also has brevity very much on its side, and all the material on it is consistent, thumping and catchy. It just sounds like a bunch of boys in a room bashing the absolute shit out of their instruments. It must have been extremely fun to make. Highlights include the brooding build-up of opening track No Future No Past, the catchy pop-punk of Stay Useless, the Idlewild-esque Our Plans, and the booming instrumental Separation. The best track off of this though is Wasted Days, which has an absolute banger of an instrumental section on it. That kicks fucking ass. So yeah, if a catchy, short, garage rock blast of energy is needed in your life, this album might well fit the bill. Next up, we have The Defenestration of St. Martin, which was the first and only solo LP by ex-Gene frontman Martin Rossiter. On this album, it's just Martin and his piano, with very little in the way of extra instrumentation or overdubs. Because of that, the songwriting really has to stand up on its own. Mercifully, it does, with Rosita being on top lyrical and melodical form. The album kicks off in spectacular fashion with 3 points on a compass, a 10-minute epic that builds into an emotional frenzy as Martin Rosita rails against his absentee father, concluding, "All I got from you is this stupid name." It is stunning. Another intense moment comes from the album's lead single, "No One Left to Blame," a dark, despair-laden rumination on suicide. Again, just stunning. That said, not everything is dark and depressing. "I Must Be Jesus" has a Divine Comedy-esque flippancy to it. "My Heart Is Designed for Pumping Blood" is amusingly callous, and "Drop Anchor" sounds in the same romantic vein as Gene's "Speak to Me Someone" or "You." So yeah, this is a great piano-based solo record from Martin Rosita, and it's just a shame that he just doesn't want to release albums anymore. Coming in next, we have Banks by Paul Banks, which was his second solo album and the first under his own name. Paul Banks, of course, is the frontman of Interpol, and basically speaking, there's not really much difference between this solo LP and Interpol's main body of work. Paul Banks hasn't changed up his songwriting style much here, although this album does strive to be at least a little lighter than Interpol's brand of post-punk. The album is cohesive and consistent, with plenty of highlights. Open of the Bass has some fat, rich sub-bass on it. Over My Shoulder has a cool rhythmic drum groove, and lead single Young Again marries off-kilter verses to a super catchy chorus. Elsewhere, I'll Sue You has some interestingly choppy guitar work, whilst closer Summertime Is Coming is probably the most light and breezy track Banks ever made. So yeah, sounding very much like the great lost Interpol album, this is just a great solo record from Paul Banks and an obvious no-brainer for post-punk fans. So we're going to be kicking off the top 5 with The Twilight Sad's third album, No One Can Ever Know, and on this LP the band are taking a left turn into electronica and synth territory. And what is it with modern post-punk bands and third albums going synth heavy? I mean, The Editors did it, I Like Trains did it, and they have The Twilight Sad going for it here. But of those bands I've mentioned, The Twilight Sad do it the best, augmenting their previous darkness with much more well-defined melodies and an added streak of pop-orientated catchiness. This record feels like another confident step forward for the band, who would finally achieve 5-star greatness with their next album. But, that's for another list because there's plenty of highlights to be had right here. Dead City is a relentless banger with its driving bass. Sick is a poignant and devastatingly sad track with lyrics like, "You look so frail, but still you hope. Teardrops fall, you look so frail, but still you hope." Don't Move is super catchy with its chorus of, "Paired off into violence. We were paired off into violence." The track Nil represents the peak of despair with its stripped back nature and atmospheric darkness, and the duo of closers, The Pop Leaning Another Bed and the brooding sci-fi soundscapes of Kill It in the Morning, end the album with a badass flourish. So yeah, No One Can Ever Know is another great record from The Twilight Sad, and the deep breath before the full body plunge of their next LP. Next up, we have The National Health, which was the fourth album by angular British emo punks Maximo Park, except on this record, the band are putting aside their angular leanings and replacing them with a more typical indie jangle style. Oh, and reverb. Lots and lots of reverb. It's a new sound for the band, but one I think absolutely works, especially with this album's more emotional focus. This is Maximo Park going down the elegant, dignified, emotive route with their fourth LP, which is a pretty common choice for a fourth LP. The trick is to do it without sounding boring or tired, and Maximo Park nail their attempt here and give birth to not only a consistent, atmospheric record, but also some of their very best songs too. The kick-ass title track and lead single absolutely rules, weaving the best chord change from Deep Purple's Child in Time into a thumping punk tune. The Undercurrents and Reluctant Love are sweeping, grandiose ballads, with the new sonic stylings giving Paul Smith ample room to impress with his great confessional lyric style. Other highlights include Banlieue, which features a cacophony of synths over a badass rocker, while Unfamiliar Places is a stripped back piece with almost whispered vocals. So yeah, this is a fantastic album, which also takes in the gorgeous driving piano ballad This Is What Becomes of the Broken Hearted, and for me, is easily Maximo Park's best LP. Coming in third place and taking home the bronze medal, we have Enjoy It While It Lasts, which was the debut album by Spector. And this is one for all the Morrissey fans out there, as Spector is this generation's evolution of the typical Smiths-inspired band. I mean, you had Gene in the 90s and you had the Ordinary Boys in the 2000s, and Spector sits nicely between them. Not quite as good as Gene, but certainly a lot better than the Ordinary Boys. So on this record you can expect lots of Britpop field catchiness, anchored by Fred McPherson's distinctive voice and excellent, witty and self-deprecating lyrics. Also, more than worthy of noting is the sense of vocal melody, which produces hooks so memorable that they would make even the Kaiser Chiefs tremble in their boots. The likes of Friday Night Don't Ever Let It End, the awfully titled Upset Boulevard, and rocking single-cut Celestine and Chevy Thunder all supply fist-pumping choruses and sing-along refrains, while tracks like Grey Suit and Tie and, again, the horrendously titled Grim Reaper see to the more miserable side of things. Come on, Spector, title your songs better, you silly fox. But the best tracks off of this, though, are the absolutely killer singles What You Wanted and Never Fade Away, which have hooks to curl up in the fetal position and die for. So yeah, this is a fantastic album that sounds like the reincarnation of Gene, Shed 7 and a million other Morrissey aping bands, but in the best possible way. And at this point in history, this kind of music is just getting rarer and rarer. So just as the title of this record implores, enjoy it while it lasts. Silver medal time, and the silver medal is going to go to Bloom by Beach House, which was the band's fourth album, and also this year's winner of the Typical Indie Album of the Year award. You know the criteria of typical indie album: lots of clean, arpeggiated, reverb-laden guitars, heavy-hearted lyrics, and gentle cathartic soundscapes. And on those terms, in that category, this might well be the best record ever made, the king or queen of the typical indie album. And it's not entirely easy, beyond what I've already said, to describe why this album is so damn good. I mean, lyrically, I'm not sure I could tell you a single lyric from this thing. That's definitely not the focus here. But then again, that's not to say that the vocals are indistinct. Far from it. In fact, Victoria Legrand's voice is absolutely essential to why this record works so well. Although occasional lyrics will jump out and give the songs a bit of context, it's the way in which she sings them that really catches the attention. You might not always know exactly what she's singing, but you know exactly how she's feeling. And then there's the melodies and production. The production first, it's just spectacular. I mean, you can hear every single note, it's crystal clear and the instruments don't get in the way of each other, quite a feat to achieve on a record so damn laden with reverb. And then there's the melodies, which just hit perpetual home runs. I mean, I could just loop tracks like The Hours or Wishes inside my brain and have them as my own personal soundtrack for the rest of time. I mean, I could go further into the other tracks, but I don't think it's really necessary. I'm sure you can grasp the type of record on offer here, even if you haven't heard it. Basically, just triple your expectations for the usual typical indie album, and you might be getting close to how absolutely brilliant this record is. Essential listening. So here we are at the top of the mountain, and the gold medal for 2012 is going to go to Fiona Apple's fourth album, the ridiculously titled Deep Breath. The idler wheel is wiser than the driver of the screw, and whipping cords will serve you more than ropes will ever do. Woo! Now that's a goddamn mouthful of an album title. So I'll immediately throw up my hands and say that I'm no huge Fiona Apple fan. I basically know nothing about her, save for the briefest of skims I did on Wikipedia in preparation for this list. And before coming to this list, I'd barely even registered her existence, and had never even heard of this record, despite its huge critical acclaim. But it was critically acclaimed with overwhelming ubiquity, so I decided to give it a spin. And yeah, game over for this year's other contestants, because this album undeniably rules and grabs my only 5-star rating of the year. And as far as I can tell, this is widely seen as possibly her best album, but also her most challenging, obtuse record that does away with easy pop melodies in favour of off-kilter, stripped-back jazz-inflected ones, shot through with a good amount of darkness and lyrical despair. And yeah, I love it. I love every single track on it. I love those weird off-kilter melodies that quickly become addictive. They just keep pulling me back in for more spins. They're mostly categorised by rolling, obfuscating piano riffs that feel dark and mellifluous. And I love the lyrics, honest and raw, but with just the right amount of poetry to make the listener want to dig deeper. It's just an awesome lyrical performance. And then there's the percussion, which hogs a lot of the more experimental, jazzy elements of the record. Periphery has percussion made by people stamping on the ground and dragging their feet on gravel. Left Alone kicks off with a great jazz drum solo. Regret is underpinned by some odd repeating sample, maybe someone locking a door. And Closer Hot Knife has awesome echoey circus drums pulsating underneath it. So yeah, 10 tracks, 42 minutes, no weak tracks whatsoever, and very much a grower. I mean, it's already my album of the year, and I like it more and more every single time I spin it. And as for my favourite song on it, well, I love them all, but that moment on Jonathan where Fiona sings, "You like to captain a capsized ship, but I like watching you live," just kills me. I also love Werewolf as well, which opens with the killer lyric, "I could liken you to a werewolf, the way you left me for dead, but I admit that I provided the full moon." Cool. And that's it. That's my 2012 list, but that might not be your list. Please sound off in the comment section and tell me all the classics that I've missed. Like, share, subscribe, and all that other kind of YouTube jazz. Make sure to check back for my 2013 list. Take care of yourself, but most importantly, just keep on ranking.